The wind moves down off the high ground carrying cold stone and diesel exhaust. Headlights sweep across the gravel shoulder of a two-lane road, and for half a second they catch something small crouched at the edge of the asphalt. Too compact to be a fox, too strange to be a stray. It's crying, not the soft mewing of a hungry kitten, but something rougher, something closer to pain than hunger. One front paw never touches the ground. It hangs curled beneath a body barely bigger than a clenched fist, wrapped in thick gray fur built for hiding among rocks and snow. Round, wide-set eyes, a flattened face held low to the ground. This is a Pallas's cat, one of the most elusive wild cats on the continent, an animal most people will never see in their lifetime. Right now, there's nowhere for it to hide. Every truck that roars past sends it flinching back from the road's edge. It blinks hard against the light, sways on three legs and cries out again into the noise. Car after car, truck after truck. Nobody slows down. Then one does. Mark almost doesn't. It's been a long day, the kind that makes most people drive straight past anything that isn't their own headlights. But the sound catches him somewhere he doesn't expect. Less like an animal in distress and more like a question being asked. He eases off the gas before he's decided to. Mark pulls his truck onto the gravel, hazards ticking in the dusk. From a distance he assumes it's a lost kitten, somebody's barn cat, dumped along the highway. He's stopped for that before. Up close the picture changes fast. The paw isn't just hurt, it's mangled. Dried blood is crusted deep into the fur. Two claws are torn away at the root, the skin around them swollen and dark. Whatever did this happened with force, and it happened recently. The animal's ribs show through its fur, its whole body trembles, not only from cold. Mark crouches a few feet back and goes still. He knows enough about wild animals to know that getting too close, too fast, is how rescues turn into emergencies. So he waits. The cat doesn't run. It should. Speed is the only defense most wild things have left once something gets this close. Instead, it drags itself 2 halting steps forward, ears flat, eyes locked on him, scanning his hands, his face, the open door of the truck behind him, searching for the danger it expects to find. It doesn't find one. The cat presses its head, just barely, against the sleeve of Mark's jacket. He doesn't move at first. Then, slowly, he shrugs out of the jacket and folds it loosely around the small, shivering body, careful to keep the ruined paw free of any pressure. He doesn't move for a long moment. He doesn't know why it's out here alone, or what happened to that paw, or what kind of night this is about to become. He only knows that this animal has decided, somehow, against every instinct it has left, that he isn't the threat. "Okay," he says quietly, barely above the wind. "I've got you." The emergency vet clinic 2 towns over isn't built for animals like this. The vet on call has never treated a Pallas's cat in her life. Most people in this part of the world have never even heard of one. But pain doesn't care what species it's wearing, and this animal has plenty of it. The waiting room is empty this late, fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic, a steel table far too cold for something this small and this scared. X-rays show 2 fractures running through the paw. 3 more claws are broken below the bed, the wounds already infected, the tissue around them swollen and discolored beneath the fur. The cat lies still under the exam light, eyes wide, breath coming fast and shallow. It doesn't fight the exam, it doesn't have the strength left to. Mark stands against the wall, arms crossed, watching the vet's face for some sign of good news. He doesn't find one. Something shifts in her expression as she scrolls back through the images a second time, then a third, the kind of look that has nothing to do with the patient's size and everything to do with what she's seeing. She studies the films a long moment before she finally speaks. "This wasn't a fall," she says, "and it wasn't a car." Mark looks up. "The fractures are too clean," she explains. "The claws weren't broken by accident, they were pulled, one at a time. Something, or someone did this to him on purpose, and not very long ago." For a moment neither of them says anything. Outside, a truck passes on the highway, the same kind of truck that drove past this animal a dozen times tonight without slowing down. Then she adds the part Mark isn't ready to hear. "The infection is moving fast, faster than it should. If it reaches the bone before the antibiotics catch up, the leg may not be something they can save." Mark looks down at the small, shaking animal under the light, the same one that pressed its head against his jacket like it already trusted him, on the side of a road where nobody else had stopped. Whatever happens next, in whatever direction this goes, he already knows one thing for certain. He isn't walking away from this. The first 48 hours decide everything, the vet says, and there's nothing gentle about them. Oliver's fever climbs through the night, his small body trembling under a heating pad that can't seem to reach deep enough. The infection in his paw spreads faster than the antibiotics can chase it down. By morning his breathing has gone shallow and fast, the kind of breathing that makes the vet techs check on him every 20 minutes instead of every hour. He won't eat. Not the warmed broth, not the soft food pressed gently to his mouth. He turns his head away each time, eyes half closed, too exhausted to do anything but survive the next hour. Mark visits before his shift and after it. He doesn't ask anyone for permission, he just shows up. He keeps thinking about all those cars that passed without stopping. He doesn't know how long Oliver stood on that roadside before headlights finally slowed down, and it's a thought he can't quite put away, even after the fever starts to break. It's on the second visit that he gives the cat a name, not because anyone tells him to, but because the patient in Kennel 6 feels wrong for something that pressed its head against his jacket on the side of a road. He calls him Oliver, he's not sure why. It just fits, old-fashioned, steady, like something that's been through hard winters before and made it out the other side. Mark starts bringing a folding chair. Some nights he reads out loud, not because Oliver understands the words, but because the sound of a calm, steady voice seems to slow the small body's breathing, just slightly, just enough. Other nights he says nothing at all, just sits close enough that Oliver can hear him breathing. He sleeps in that chair more nights than he sleeps in his own bed. Then 6 days in, something changes. Oliver lifts his head on his own, sniffs at the bowl Mark sets down, eats, barely, a few bites, but enough to make the vet tech smile for the first time all week. It's a small thing. It doesn't feel small. 2 days after that, Oliver puts weight on the bad leg for the first time, wobbling, favoring it heavily, but standing. By the end of the week he's pacing the small enclosure on his own, ears up, scanning the room the way a healthy animal scans a room, alert, not afraid. The fear in his eyes starts to fade, replaced by something else. He still flinches at sudden movement, he still freezes when a stranger walks past his kennel. But around Mark, his whole posture changes, ears forward, tail low and loose instead of tucked, eyes slow to blink instead of wide and locked. That slow blink becomes a signal Mark learns to watch for. In the only language Oliver has, it means he feels safe. Within a few weeks, Oliver follows Mark from one end of the recovery room to the other, matching his pace, never more than a few feet behind. At night, when Mark sits with him, Oliver climbs onto his chest and settles there, the rise and fall of Mark's breathing the only thing that seems to fully calm him. The first time Mark has to leave for more than an hour, Oliver cries at the kennel door until he's gone, and starts again the second he hears Mark's voice return. It would be easy, watching the two of them, to think this story is heading somewhere simple, a man and his cat. A happy ending already written. Then the wildlife specialists arrive to evaluate him, and everything gets more complicated. Oliver isn't a stray kitten, he never was. He's a fully wild Pallas's cat, a species that doesn't tame, doesn't adapt to leashes or living rooms, no matter how gentle the hands that nursed him back to health. The specialists are careful, almost apologetic when they explain it to Mark. An animal like this can heal in captivity. It can even learn, in its own limited way, to trust a particular person, but it cannot become a pet. Somewhere down the line, the specialists say, Oliver will need to go back to the wild he came from. Relocation, a word that sounds clinical and small for something that feels much bigger to Mark. That night, alone in his truck outside the rehab center, he sits for a long time without starting the engine. He doesn't argue with the specialists, he knows they're right. He also knows that every evening he spends in that recovery room makes the idea of an empty kennel a little harder to imagine. Months pass. Oliver grows stronger, faster, more wary of everyone except the one person who's been there since the beginning. The day finally comes when the rehabilitation team moves him into a larger, more natural enclosure, closer to the forest, designed to slowly reintroduce him to the kind of terrain he'll need to survive in alone. It's meant to be a good sign, a milestone, proof that he's almost ready. Then, early one morning, a staff member arrives to check on him and stops cold at the gate. The enclosure is empty. Oliver is gone. For 3 days there's no sign of him. The rehabilitation team spreads out across the tree line at first light, calling a name that, technically, a wild animal has no reason to answer to. Mark walks with them anyway, scanning every shadow between the pines for a shape too small and too gray to be anything but Oliver. Nothing. They keep going after dark anyway. Lanterns swinging through the trees, beams catching nothing but frost and bare branches. Mark's voice goes hoarse from calling a name into woods that don't answer back. By the second night, a storm rolls down off the mountains, and everyone stops pretending this is routine. Snow falls thick and fast, erasing tracks almost as quickly as anyone can follow them. Temperatures drop hard after dark. Out here, that kind of cold doesn't forgive mistakes, not for animals, and not for one still finishing its recovery. Mark doesn't say the thought out loud. He doesn't have to. Everyone on the search team is thinking some version of the same thing. Then, on the fourth morning, one of the rangers pulls the memory card from a trail camera staked near the eastern ridge and goes very still. There he is. The footage is grainy, lit only by the camera's motion sensor, but unmistakable. Oliver, moving low and fast across a rocky slope, stops, crouches, and disappears into a thicket. Seconds later, he reappears with something small and limp in his jaws. He's hunting. Somewhere behind Mark, one of the rangers lets out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding for 4 days. Not begging, not waiting by a bowl, hunting, on his own, through a storm that nearly stopped a search team 3 times his size. It should feel like good news, and in a way it is, but watching it, Mark feels something heavier settle in beside the relief. This is exactly what everyone hoped would happen. It's also the moment he has to admit, fully, that Oliver isn't his anymore. He never really was. The rehab director says it gently, the way you tell someone something they already know. Oliver doesn't need rescuing now. He needs to be left alone to do what he was always built to do. Mark nods. He doesn't trust himself to say much more than that. Weeks turn into months. The search effort winds down, replaced by occasional camera trap sightings, each one a little farther from where Oliver disappeared. He's thriving, by every measure that matters to the people who study animals like him. He's also, by every measure that matters to Mark, gone. Mark goes back to his life, mostly. He still glances toward the tree line some evenings, out of habit more than hope. Then, one winter night, almost a year to the day since a small crying shape first appeared on a roadside, something moves at the edge of Mark's property. He almost doesn't trust his own eyes. The animal standing at the fence line is bigger than the one he remembers, broader through the chest, thick winter coat, powerful in a way the starving kitten from that first night never was. For a moment, Mark assumes it's just a bobcat passing through. Then it tilts its head, ears swiveling toward the sound of his voice, and Mark's chest goes tight. Oliver. The cat doesn't run. He doesn't flee toward the trees the way every instinct should tell a wild animal to. Instead, he lowers his body and moves forward, slow and deliberate, the same cautious approach Mark remembers from a recovery room a long time ago. Mark crouches in the snow and holds out his hand, the way he used to. Oliver studies him for a long moment, scanning his face, his hands, the stillness of him, then closes the last few feet between them. His nose brushes Mark's fingers. For one suspended second, neither of them moves. It's the same animal, wilder now, stronger. But underneath all of it, somehow, still him. Mark doesn't try to hold him, doesn't reach for a leash or a carrier or anything that would turn this moment into something it isn't. He just lets it be what it is. That's when he notices Oliver isn't fully settled. His ears keep flicking back toward the dark line of trees behind him, then forward again toward Mark, then back to the forest. He paces a few steps away, looks back, paces again, the unmistakable body language of an animal trying to lead. Mark hesitates only a second before he stands and follows. The snow is deep, the night close to silent except for his own breathing and the soft crunch of boots breaking through fresh powder. Oliver moves ahead of him, pausing every so often to make sure Mark is still coming. They don't go far. Just past the first line of trees, Oliver stops at the base of a low rock outcrop and sits, watching Mark with an expression that, if you didn't know better, you might almost call expectant. Mark kneels down to get a closer look at the fresh snow near a narrow gap in the rocks. There, pressed into the white surface, are tracks, several sets of them, small, far too small to belong to the animal sitting quietly beside him. Past the rock outcrop, tucked into a shallow den lined with dry grass and fur, are 3 kittens. They're barely bigger than Mark's palm, eyes only just open, tumbling over each other in a pile to stay warm. Oliver sits at the entrance, watching Mark's reaction the way he used to watch for danger in a hospital room, alert, ready to act, but not afraid. It takes Mark a long moment to understand what he's looking at. The starving, broken kitten nobody on that highway bothered to stop for has grown into something nobody quite predicted either. He's not just surviving out here, he's raising a family. Mark sits back on his heels in the snow and doesn't trust his voice for a while. There's a kind of symmetry to it that feels too neat to be real, except that it is. An animal that was found half dead on the side of a road, given up on by everyone except one stranger who happened to be driving by, is now the one thing standing between 3 newborn lives and a winter that doesn't care whether they make it. Mark backs away carefully, leaving the den undisturbed. Wild animals don't need an audience. They need distance and quiet, and the kind of help that doesn't look like help at all. That winter turns out to be a hard one, the kind that thins out prey animals across the whole range, the kind rangers worry about every year but rarely see get this bad. Reports start coming in of struggling wildlife throughout the area, animals pushed toward the edges of human land, looking for anything easier than what nature is offering. Oliver starts bringing his family closer, not to Mark's door, not anywhere near people directly, but closer to the tree line bordering Mark's land, the same patch of forest where, a year earlier, a single line of small tracks had led to a den nobody else knew existed. Mark notices the pattern before anyone tells him about it. He doesn't approach. He doesn't try to recreate what happened the first time, on the roadside, in a hospital room, by the fence on a snowy night. He's learned enough by now to know the difference between helping an animal and interfering with one, so instead he does the only thing within his control. He sets out food in the same far corner of his property each evening, never close enough to create dependency, never visible enough to draw attention from anyone passing by, a heated water source that won't freeze overnight. A simple windbreak built from stacked brush, just enough shelter for anything small enough to use it. He never sees Oliver take any of it directly. He doesn't need to. Some mornings the food is gone, some mornings there are tracks in fresh snow, 4 sets now, not one. Years go by the way they tend to once you're not counting them carefully. Mark gets older. His knees complain on cold mornings the way they didn't used to. The kittens, wherever and whatever they've become, are long past being kittens. He still walks out to that same corner of the property most evenings, mostly out of habit, half expecting nothing. Then, one late afternoon, with frost already settling into the grass, Oliver appears at the tree line one more time. He's older too. Slower in the way he moves, a little gray showing at the edges of that thick winter coat. But there's no hesitation in him, no fear, no scanning the surroundings for danger the way he once had to, every hour of every day, just to survive. Beside him, keeping a careful distance, is another cat, broader, younger, clearly raised wild, watching Mark the way any sensible wild animal should watch an unfamiliar shape. Oliver looks at Mark, then at the younger cat, then back at Mark, almost deliberately, the way he used to look between a bowl of food and the man who'd set it down. The younger cat takes one slow step forward, then another. It stops well short of Mark, well within what any wildlife expert would call a safe and respectful distance. But it doesn't run. It holds Mark's gaze for a long moment, ears forward, body relaxed, in a way that no truly wild Pallas's cat should ever feel safe enough to manage around a human. It isn't trust earned through contact. It's trust passed down, inherited somehow from a father who once learned, on a cold roadside a lifetime ago, that not every hand reaching toward him meant harm. Mark doesn't move. He just lets it happen, the way he's learned to let most of this happen, without trying to hold on to any of it too tightly. Looking back years later, Mark still isn't sure he ever fully understood what that one stop on the side of the road set in motion. He only knows how he tells it now, when people ask. The day I stopped for a crying kitten beside the road, I thought I was saving a life. Years later, standing beside Oliver and his family, I realized that one act of kindness had saved many.